You've just tuned into Inner Station, where the latest and hottest topics are always on air. I'm your host, Cami, and each episode we serve up Pete with fun chats, fire insights, and special guest appearances, with a couple of surprises along the way. Now, the South African art scene is constantly evolving with new voices, new mediums, and new ways of seeing the world. In the spirit of redefining the game, we're unpacking how the industry itself is shifting today. And joining us is someone who's had a front row seat to these changes for years, Ame Bal, who is the director of David Creek Projects. Welcome to Inner Station, Ame.
Hi, Cami. Thanks so much for having me. It's lovely being with you.
Of course, thank you for joining us. And before we go any further, you became a PhD graduate recently. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel very chuffed with myself at the moment, but thank you.
Yes, I caught your post on LinkedIn, I think like 2 days ago, and I was like, yeah, we need to call her Dr. Ame now.
That's it, yeah.
So, Ame, you're an artist, and as mentioned, you are the director of David Creek Projects in South Africa, and you're also a true art aficionado. What is it about the arts that drives you, and what inspired you to pursue your PhD in art history?
Yeah, what is it about the art that drives me? Wow, it is, I mean, at its essence, at its core, I think, art has the ability to communicate across all borders, visible and invisible. But, it's a way of making sense of the world. For me, it's resilient, it's rebellious. Maybe that's one of the things that I like the most about art. It's in all its forms, it feels like just the act of participating in art or reading about art is a rebellious act, because it's so against the grain of what is normal, which is maybe a bit contradicting to what we want to talk about today. But I mean, that's really for me what is so special about it. And I was thinking a lot about this in preparation for our call. It's just, what is it? But it's a feeling, it's like it's really. Art is so close to my being as a whole. Ever since I was a child, I only read art books and loved looking at the pictures. And I've always wanted to be close to artists and their practices, which is really why I ultimately pursued my PhD in art history, because it's just been kind of a natural trajectory for me through my education and my professional practice. And it's just something that I wanted to do. There's really no fancy answer to why I did a PhD, and I really don't want to be called a doctor, because I think that it's not really, it's not about that, it's really just about understanding how systems work. And in the industry that I am, I work with a lot of artists, and what was really interesting to me about the process was that I could actually structurally understand why things happen the way that they happen, why artists do what they do. And it's really enriched the way that you think about things. I mean, because if you talk about industries, we always try and make sense. I mean, I often try and make sense of, is what I do real work type of thing, And doing the PhD actually just allowed me to formalize my thought process about why artists do what they do, how it all works, and where's my place, my role in all of that. So that's really what pushed me to do it, and what enabled me to do it. I want to say, the risk of sounding the wrong way, but it's what enabled me to do it kind of effortlessly, is that my research was so ingrained in my everyday practice and my work. So I just really love doing it. Won't do it again, but I loved doing the PhD.
I love that answer, because it just sounds so inspired. It genuinely sounds like you were just sort of letting your passion guide you through all of it, and I love that. And speaking of your PhD, your dissertation looked at independent and private initiatives and how they're reshaping the South African art landscape. From your research, why do you think that this shift is happening, and what does it mean for our broader art ecosystem in the country?
So, my research was, as you said, focused really, it's on independent artists, but it was really the role of the digital space, the internet, that enables them to function within the art world. And the thing is that they have artists and galleries, everybody, I mean, really since the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody went online. The entire industry had to go online because we're very reliant on personal contact, people coming to galleries. And prior to COVID, people were using websites and Instagram, but in a very loose way, just as a supplementary marketing tool. But since then, because everyone had to go online, people really realized the strength that the digital space, as I call it in my research, has for producing content, putting yourself out there, and really creating an autonomous practice. So galleries were doing certain things. They were putting shows online. They were putting information about artists and artworks online. And artists recognized that, and they're like, well, I could do that. And they started doing it themselves, and they started showing parts of their process and all of that. So a major shift has been caused by people realizing the importance of digital. And I think you'll agree, in the last definitely 5 years, there's been a huge acceleration in digital technology, AI technology, and all of that. So, I mean, the digital tools really democratize participation in the arts, allowing artists to really build audiences, networks, and income streams from various platforms, social media. I mean, we're really in the age of self-representation and self-publishing, which has become so easy for everybody. And then if you think about it in the arts, an artist could have an Instagram page. They can ask AI to build them a website. Things, skills that they didn't need to necessarily have before, or that they didn't have, are now accessible to them through programming. So this is now actually a further step from what I took in my research, but just how it's grown and how it has accelerated is crazy. And then what's happened is in the art world is that these power dynamics are shifting between artists and galleries, artists and institutions. Everybody that's an agent, let's say, in this art field, artists are negotiating their positions in the art world from kind of strengthened position through their presence that they have online. People already know about them. They may be selling work. So the way that they work with galleries are in a much more controlled position. They can make decisions. It's also enabled them to be a lot more flexible. And I think not only artists, but galleries and other institutions have had to be more flexible and have non-exclusive arrangements, because now we can work with multiple people. And new relationships are emerging from that flexibility, which I think is great. And then, as an effect of all this happening, galleries and other institutional structures are having to adapt and become more collaborative and responsive to what artists are wanting. And it's shifting, it's shifting the focus to what the artist wants and what the artist needs, and what they need to have these sustainable careers. So it's been a major shift from, the digital has such an impact on us, and the way that we learn to use it is so empowering to so many artists.
And I'm so happy to hear that, because I was going to ask you about sort of how digitization has shifted the dynamic between artists and curators and different institutions as well. So it's good to know that for the artists, it has become more empowering, not just in that they can drive their own process and have more sort of control over their marketing and stuff, but also from the perspective of like having more negotiating power, and also being able to work with like different galleries and stuff as well, right? So they're not so much locked into one thing, and you're really able to have an experience of the overall industry instead of just sort of where you are, the pocket that you find yourself in. So I think that's really cool.
No, it definitely is.
And I'm like, one thing that you mentioned that you grapple with sometimes yourself is sort of validating what you do as like a career, right? Especially because it's far from what is traditional. I mean, there are the traditional careers, and I think anything that is creative, sort of, we all kind of ask ourselves, is this a real job? But with the professionalization of the arts that is coming up, has it changed any sort of opportunities, and what does this mean for the sustainability of the art sector, just in terms of art being regarded more so as a professional venture versus just something that is extracurricular?
I think the core of that question really comes to me as the way that artists run themselves as a business. It comes with, if I'm an artist taking my practice seriously, if I'm a hobbyist, that's one thing. But if I am an artist who wants to make a career, or any creative person who wants to make a career out of what I'm doing, I need to take it seriously as a business. And what does that mean? You know, so that means that you are functioning as an entrepreneur, or you're functioning as a project manager. You're functioning as, you know, in a way, something that relates to the world outside of your internal world of creative process, right? So, and, you know, I think that that's where art schools and, you know, an understanding about art as a profession is quite important to encourage, you know, from a young age, people understanding that, you know, whatever it is that you want to do, you can make it work if you run it as a kind of professional practice. So the professionalization strengthens arts as basically a legitimate economic sector, which attracts investment and long-term support. Now, how does that happen? You know, it really happens through artists that act as entrepreneurs and how they reach out to different industries. So, or, you know, different people in the arts are saying, I'm an artist, I have professional training, and there is a standard towards how I connect with curators or galleries or institutions. And it's all about reinforcing the cultural ecosystem that we work in. Creative economy is quite an important concept in the economic discussion about arts, because what it does is that, you know, when art is formalized as a profession, it feeds into other industries like tourism and advertising. And, you know, people are saying, well, you know, because the worst thing is, and I think in art and music, people say, oh, you will give you exposure. Sure, exposure is great, but why don't you pay me for the artwork that you're going to plaster over your industry banners, or, you know, the gifts that you put out? So it's changing the perception about what art is. It's not just a pretty picture. It's a skill that someone has, in the same way that craftsman has a skill, or that, you know, someone that's great with numbers has a skill that you'll pay to sort out your books, you know. So it's really changing the understanding about art as work. And, you know, I think that plays a big role in creating sustainable income for artists. You know, it limits their challenges in terms of, you know, impacting their career decisions, because that's sort of the biggest thing that we have with artists, is that they don't have like monthly sustainable income. But there's ways for them to be collaborating with other industries that can create that, you know, through teaching. A lot of artists are teachers. A lot of artists will do commercial work. You know, they'll make sculptures, or they'll make gifts. I know this woman in New York that does awards. Like, she makes awards with gold leaf and glass objects, which is her practice. She's a glass artist, and she works in Venice making these things. But she got a long-term collaboration where she makes awards for people in the creative industry, like kind of like an Oscar type of thing. And you know, so she's partnered with a corporate institution to be making these things. So, you know, there's just a lot of changing the perception about it is creating opportunities for people to be collaborating more across the board, and making people feel comfortable with investing or supporting or paying for this work that people do.
And I was just on the business aspect of things. Is that like a thing that you've seen? I mean, because you've just been through the school system yourself recently, is why I asked. Are you finding that now there is more sort of education around that part for fine art students as well, just in terms of like how you actually take what you're learning and turn it into a business beyond just the selling of your pieces?
So, I mean, it's a tough question to answer, because my entire 4 years of communicating with my supervisor was basically online and not really integrated into the landscape of the educational system. But from what I've heard, they try to teach professional practice, but it's not, you know, it's for me. And I know that they do send out a lot of opportunities for careers and so on for art graduates and so on. But I think from my experience, what I've seen is that artists don't know what to do with themselves when they finished art school, unless they've had a mentor, or unless they've worked in a gallery, or unless they've had some kind of exposure. And it's not dissimilar to any other industry. It's only that other industries have more support in this realm, you know, where you know, if I say I want to be a creative person, I want to work in the arts, people don't understand that as a work, you know, like they don't understand that as, okay, well, what does it mean to work in the arts? And I can't tell you how many people I've had come to me say, well, what do you do all day in the
Yeah.
gallery. And I feel like responding, I'm sitting here waiting for you to come in, basically. But it's not that, it's we have a system. You have correspondence, you do sales, you do project management, you have to do distribution and logistics, you're shipping things all over, you have to do pricing, there's so much that you have to do. And I think that creating awareness about these things is very important. So now I don't think that it happens as comprehensively in institutions because it's not necessarily going to be taught by people who've had to do that as work.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to do, and this is something that I'm quite passionate about, is creative or career development. We try and work with a lot of interns to get them some experience in the gallery environment or in a creative environment to see how it works and what you need to do. But often it's hard to get people to commit for a long period of time. I mean, in the idea of unpaid internships in our industry is people don't want to work for free.
At all.
They don't want to learn for free. So which is weird. It's a weird thing because growing up, that's what we had to do. Is you said, okay, I'm gonna go check out what this industry was about, and see what. And the reason why it's important, as I said, is that there is just not understanding and support and encouragement for artists who want to pursue, people who want to pursue careers in arts.
Yeah,
I think privately we could do more to have a training program or to have dialogue or to invite people in. And, I think people in creative industries can do more. I mean, like this podcast, I think is quite important for people to understand that, you can come in and learn and understand, even if it's one conversation, that what are the steps in working in a creative space?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. I think
that does answer my question, because that is a thing that I found just with friends as well that have studied things that are very niche in the art world or niche in media and film and stuff. And it is that like most people don't necessarily know what to do with themselves after the fact. And I think to your point about people not wanting to do like unpaid internships, I think it's because people wait until like they've graduated, and now you have the pressure of, well, I have to live, so I have to make money to do that. Versus while you're a student, you can be sort of going into galleries and having these conversations and doing the internships, because then there just isn't as much pressure economically, hopefully, to like, you don't have financial responsibilities that are that big yet. So you can do the unpaid. But I think,
just to that point as well, is that I think that's why creative industries are really nurtured in the home, and in the understanding of, if your parents are people who like art or who like anything creative, music, whatever, it's important to involve children from a young age or to involve families in that environment so that they can see. And if you really, I mean, I'm quite a structural thinker. That's why I think I can break down these things. I think not everybody is like that. But if you look at something and you say, okay, well, what are the moving parts of this career? Like, let's say, and I'm talking now about musicians, but, a band has to come on stage, they play for you, and then they go off. That's what most people see. But what you actually need to see is, what does it take? It takes practice. It takes the fact that you have to know how to play the instruments. You have to have the instruments. You have to play the instruments. You have to set a date for a gig. And what is that really? It's project management.
Right,
so, other than the skill and everything that comes with being a creative person, I think that when we think about things like that, and when you start educating at a young age or any age, I mean, the people are never too old to learn, but really appreciating everything as something that took effort and something that takes skill, then we're changing the way that the support that exists for those industries. And then, the students, even in school or in varsity, they're going to say, well, I know this gallery, let's go see if they will take you for an internship, or even teaching people to say, write the email and say, well, I'm interested in learning. How can I learn more? And I think that is so important, because they have it with professionals. Professional careers have that. You have to do articles, you have to do what you have to do if you're a medical professional, you have to do a number of years, Zuma years, or whatever they call it. And in creative industries, it should be the same.
No, I agree. I think that would go a long way. And I mean, one of the things that you mentioned about art is that it transcends borders and cultures. How do private organizations and independent practitioners contribute to the international cultural exchange? And why is this important for our South African artists?
Yeah, so I mean, we're pretty far away from everything. I don't know if you've seen a world map lately, but
We
South
are very
Africa is very south of
far.
everything, you know. And if you think about, especially the arts, where it all happens, it happens. The industries that are very developed are North America, Europe, Asia. These are the top of creative industry areas.
Mm,
They're very far away from us. So, I think for South Africa in particular, our art, we deal with a lot of international clients, and they're all blown away by the art because we have the stories. People are telling
mhm.
interesting stories through their art. It's in a way, we have great art schools, we have great communal art spaces where there's multiple art studios in one building. So artists are learning from each other, which is incredible. But the thing that we don't have is, or that we're struggling with, is really that international exposure. So especially in Johannesburg at the moment, a lot of international visitors are flying now direct to Cape Town. A lot of airlines have
Yeah.
created flights to Cape Town. So visitors would rather go on holiday in Cape Town than the way that they used to work, which was coming through Joburg via Cape Town. And we would get a
Yeah.
lot of international people seeing work here and coming to fairs and all that kind of thing, which no longer happens. So what happens is that, our art sector just kind of remains within itself.
Mm,
Unless people are saying, unless galleries have an international presence, they have a gallery in New York or London or wherever that may be.
yeah.
Or if they do art fairs, and a lot of galleries focus on art fairs. And this is one of the powerful things about working with galleries and institutions, is that they have the capital, they have the ability to be showing artists internationally, which is one of the main reasons why artists in the past and maybe now want to be represented by
Mm,
a gallery. But now with the digital, you can have international exposure through the access of your phone. Like your work could be promoted internationally to various people across the world, which is a wonderful tool for people. So we really in the arts need to find ways to not only show digital that we exist and that we are participating in the global art dialogue, but also through physical presence. And that's where private and institutions really show artists at an international level. I mean, one of the main things is the Venice Biennale, which we participate in biannually. But the more prominent structure is art fairs. That's where artists show their work internationally. And we've had such a great response to our artists' work from South Africa abroad.
Yeah.
And you can imagine how that's quite a compliment, I think, because there's so much work out there. There's so many galleries, so many artists practicing. But it's such an important way for us to have that cultural exchange dialogue, to understand what the conversations are going on in the world, and for people to know us. I mean, I think that's one of the most effective things about art, is the way that we can tell an authentic story about what's going on here, because we know the news is problematic. It depends on where you get your news. But if you see a really sincere work of art by somebody, they're talking about the landscape they grew up in. So we're learning about cultures, we're learning about circumstance, we're learning about each other, and we're getting really the truth about somebody's truth. But we're learning the truth about South Africa through art, or through other countries through art, which I think is just so powerful. But it's happening through collaborations, I guess, and showing work abroad.
And I think that's what you've just spoken about is a key sort of theme that I've seen this season, is with everybody that we've spoken to, the general consensus is there's so much happening in South Africa. There's so many great things that we're producing, but the rest of the world doesn't necessarily get to know about them. And so I think digital really is a very great sort of driver for us as South Africans to get our stuff out there. Because maybe it is like you're saying, that we're just so far south on the map that we're almost inaccessible. So we have to use everything that we can to get our stuff out there.
Have you ever heard those people, like international people, asking, are there lions in your backyard? Or, You know, it's
That's always so trippy to me because what do you mean?
they could be. It depends on where you live, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's like people applying themselves to different places, and that's also, I guess, where the internet becomes great, a research tool. But people are like can be a bit lazy. They don't always check it out. And
Yeah.
I've met so many. It's actually, I must actually correct myself here, but I've met a lot of people abroad who love South Africa, who've been to South Africa.
Yes.
We work a lot in New York, and there's a lot of people who visited Johannesburg. Surprisingly, a lot of people who've come here.
Hmm.
But I think that it is very far away, and people underestimate the barriers of geography.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go any place in the world, why would you come here?
Yeah.
This is the question that we have to ask ourselves, which has. And I think it's important to ask the questions you want answers to and that you want to change.
Hmm.
So why would people come in? Then how do you mediate that issue through partnering with somebody? And I think a lot of it has to do with long-term commitment, and finding partners and I say partners like galleries or anybody that you can work with that has the same goals as you.
Yeah.
That can achieve those goals. So partnering with galleries who have international presence, and how does it serve them? And I think that there's a lovely push and pull between what individuals and institutions need in order to achieve the success they want to achieve.
Yeah.
And, that's a great way about thinking how we cross-pollinate across the globe.
Definitely. Now, I mean, with digital platforms and AI entering the art world, how are artists sort of adapting, and what role do you see tech playing in shaping how art is sort of evolving? Because I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff with digital artists in particular being affected by AI. So how is tech really affecting things from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that artists are integrating digital tools a lot more in their practices. 5 years ago, NFTs were a big thing. Everybody was trying to produce digital art and get involved in blockchain and trying to figure out a way to, again, monetize their practice in a sustainable way. I think NFTs have fallen away a lot. So people have really come to understand that the digital production is not necessarily an answer for them, even though, it's expanding the field of production in the sense of it's creating new avenues for people to explore imagery, to have visuals to their content and all of that kind of thing. But I think for, let's call it more traditional tactile visual artists, it's really a way to disseminate their work, monetize their work, build audiences, create an experience of the work online, the viewing rooms, and as I said, websites. AI is so we have to think quite broadly about AI and think about it as a structural tool in enabling us to do the things that we want to do. And again, for an artist, your goals are very important. So what tools can you use to achieve those goals? So I think that, it expands interactive media and immersive storytelling for an artist practice. And, I think we do have to accept that the future is hybrid. We're physically here and we're living in the digital space.
Yeah.
And I think it's also given artists a lot of confidence. A lot of artists are shy or inward looking individuals. They quietly work at their practice, but they find through digital tools the voice to be out there and to promote themselves in a quiet way that doesn't really require criticism, direct criticism. So I think it's given, and then you build on that confidence, and it gives, if you're posting an artwork on Instagram, which is now very at base level, and people respond to that and say, wow, that's great. That's a tool that's, you should keep going. It inspires people to do more. And I think that's such an important thing for artists producing work is to have an output.
Yeah.
So for art, and this is one thing that I found in my research, is that where artists are not able to be showing with galleries, the Instagram or Substack or whatever platform that they're using, it gives them a platform to post something that validates the production of that item or that artifact that they've produced. So, it's really enabling people to just carry on doing what they're doing, at base level. But it has so many benefits. It has really increased or broadened how people interact with the arts in general.
Yeah. And I mean, we do live in a very screen saturated world, and there is a growing desire for more tactile physical art experiences as well. How are artists helping maintain that human connection from that perspective? And why does this kind of thing matter for the future of the arts, right? Because you did mention that we are moving towards a more hybrid situation. So how is this gonna help us get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that artists have kind of maintained tactility, and there's like it's not an anti-technology issue,
Mm,
but they've made their works and their practices more labor intensive to kind of emphasize the nature of handwork,
yeah,
something that's handmade. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's also a response to the notion of digital saturation because there's so much online all the time that artists producing things slowly actually speaks to sustainability.
mm,
And yeah, I mean, there's this thing called slow fashion, I guess, is
yeah,
like a big deal in South Africa and other places as well. Producing something slowly and labor intensively really helps people understand that there's true craftsmanship behind something and true skill behind something, which is something I think that people outside of the arts have always struggled to understand.
mm,
You know, we have so many people coming in saying, "Oh, my kid could make that shirt," you know, let them try type of thing.
yeah,
And I think it's kind of at the essence of now we're dealing with the same issues. Like if AI or digital tools can produce something that an artist could produce with years of practice and years of skill, where do we draw the lines between what the future is for artists making physical work
mm,
the digital space becoming important and an enabler for people to be dabbling or to be participating in that. So the response by artists is to produce, as I said, more labor intensive stuff, more tactile stuff, you know, combining various materials. I've seen like collage, for example, pop up a lot. I've seen artists working with different materialities like fabric and grass and sewing and all these things. And I think it's a wonderful way to be preserving culture and tradition and things away from the digital. So I mean,
yeah,
it's very important to maintain human connection, and I think this is quite an important conversation for us in this enhanced digital era is that how do we maintain our connections to each other, our connections to the real world? You
yeah,
know, because if you think about the future, it could just be a white room with virtual goggles, and everything that happens to you is in the digital space. So I think it's quite important that we preserve tactility, that we preserve physical things, physical artifacts,
yeah,
because there's security for me in that. I think in artists as well, there's security in producing something that can be preserved in a space.
yeah,
And it's a very important thing that we do need to focus on. And I think that we do need to separate, I mean, in a way, like integrate, but also separate the different things that exist in the world.
yeah.
And I think that that is, yeah, I mean, the digital is there. We need to use it. We're all on it. But there is a need for us to preserve physical artifacts
As
and
well,
matter.
yeah. And I hear you from the perspective of finding security in sort of having the physical artifacts as well, because I think anything digital always kind of feels like you could wake up tomorrow and the site has crashed. You could wake up tomorrow and everything's gone. But I think also my favorite thing with sort of physical art is that every civilization we know of, all we have are the artifacts. That's the only thing that sort of stood the test of time. And so I think even for our time, as much as there is digital stuff being produced, what's going to stand the test of time will be the physical artifacts. And yeah, I'm glad that artists are sort of holding on to that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, cultural significance is really produced through texts, through images, through, I mean, even if you think about the fashion of today,
Mm,
there are museums, exhibitions dedicated to times, fashion in a specific time that
yeah,
speaks to why that fashion existed like that. You know, like if you think about war times, what women wore in war times, they
yeah,
wore pants and collar shirts because they were working in factories. So it's like, to me, it's so interesting thinking about the relevance of objects in a specific time because it tells such a broad story about
yeah,
where we are and why we are. And it maybe comes back to your first question about why art is what is it about art that I love, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's the ability to capture so much information in such a contained area, you know, where if you had to tell anybody, let's say, a story about any period of time in the world, it's going to take a lot of words to really get to the essence of that, where you could look at a painting or a drawing or something that's particularly detailed, and you can actually unpack a number of themes and understand a number of things about a specific period of time just by looking at one picture.
Yeah. And that's the thing with art, isn't it? Is like you look at one piece and then you have to sort of you get interested in the context of like the time it was created in. And suddenly you're going down a whole history rabbit hole, but like civilizations you knew nothing about. So I think that I think that's really cool. And I think it is very important for us to really fight for physical artifacts.
Totally. And I want to say also to the listeners, beware, because art is addictive. And
It
as
is.
soon as you grasp it, it consumes your whole life. Doesn't
Mm.
matter what industry. And when you start understanding what it's about, and I'm not just talking about subject matter in art, like, you know, for example, we've got a print workshop at our building where we physically produce artworks on linoleum or copper, scratching into. And when people see that, they become completely obsessed.
Yeah.
with the nature of making this object, and it is quite addictive, art and creativity, I think, in general. So,
Mm.
yeah, beware.
I think it's a worthy addiction.
Totally.
Before I let you go, I'd love to play a round of hot takes with you. How it works is I'm going to give you three categories, and from those categories, you're going to choose one, and then you just answer a mystery question from your category of choice.
Okay.
Okay. So your categories are art and culture, we've got creativity and imagination, and we've got creativity and process.
Ooh, let's go with creativity and imagination.
Okay. Your question is, since you love investigative podcasts, this came up in like one of our conversations. If you could create your own mystery to solve, what unusual art world case would your podcast be about?
Oh my goodness, this is a good question. Uh, if I had my own investigation podcast about a thing in the art world, okay, let me just think about it for 1 second. Yeah, I mean, I would trace perhaps the origin story of an edition artwork. You know, when you're in a gallery, you see a picture on a wall that's framed, and going backwards to see what the steps were in creating that process, which would bring us to, you know, what actually made the image on the plate, who framed it, you know, where the inspiration for the artwork came from, what the artist drew in, you know, in preparation for this thing, and all the people involved, I guess.
I think that's really cool because I would tune in because I feel like you would go down a lot of like the artists in history have crazy stories behind their works. So I feel like you would just be going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and it would be super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be titled The Life of a Work of Art, right?
Yeah.
And you could even use an old work and see how, I mean, it's so interesting if you go through auction records to see what the history of a painting was. I mean, there was some, I heard a few years ago, there was someone who found a Van Gogh painting in like a house in the Free State.
Oh, wow.
So tracing like the history of that work of art, which would be very interesting.
Because how did it get there?
When it was made.
Right.
It's a good idea.
That's a good idea. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ame. This has been such a great conversation, and you've really given us an interesting and hopeful look into what's been happening in the South African art scene. And a big thank you to everybody at home for tuning in today as well. And before you leave, please leave us a like, give us a subscription if you haven't already, and leave me in the comments to let me know what sort of interesting developments you've observed in the South African art landscape. And I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.